If there's one element of television that used to be fairly common but has become increasingly obsolete over the years, it's the production of clip show episodes. A clip show is a TV episode that primarily consists of clips from past episodes. A clip show will usually have a bare-bones plot that is just used as a frame story to justify stringing a series of random clips together. Basically, every clip show is a Family Guy episode, but the cutaway gags are just stuff we've all seen before. From a production standpoint, clip shows were appealing because they cost less to produce than a regular episode due to not having to record as much new material. And from an audience standpoint, it was a chance to view old highlights from a TV show when there were no alternative ways to watch them. Of course, with most TV clips now being easily accessible through video sharing websites like YouTube, clip shows have become increasingly unnecessary, and as such have fallen out of favour. To get away with a clip show nowadays, you'd have to really subvert the formula, like in the It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia episode, called The Gang Does a Clip Show, where the unreliable narration of the characters starts to alter the events playing out on screen. One primary example of how clip shows have been abandoned over the years is the long-running series The Simpsons, which used to employ clip shows semi-regularly in its early years, but gave up on them as the show went on. The Simpsons produced clip shows purely for budgetary reasons. There was intense pressure on the show's staff to produce extra episodes each season, with the Fox network wanting them to make clip shows as they cost half of what a normal episode cost to produce, but the syndication rights could be sold at full price. Apparently there was even a suggestion of having 4 clip shows per season. Could you imagine how irritating that would have been? That's like 1 out of every 5 episodes. Luckily they managed to work their way down from 4 per season to only having 5 throughout the first 13 seasons. These being Season 4's So It's Come to This, a Simpsons clip show, Season 6's, another Simpsons clip show, Season 7's, the 138th episode Spectacular, Season 9's, All Singing All Dancing, and Season 13's Gump Roast. Also, I want to point out that just because an episode uses clips from a past episode doesn't automatically mean it's a clip show. If that were true, you'd have to count almost every Sideshow Bob episode as one. The clip shows were eventually phased out and replaced by the anthology episodes instead. I don't know if the anthology episodes could save on production costs in the same way clip shows did though, considering they had to come up with completely new set designs for most of them. But I guess producing 3 shorter 7-minute stories might be less strenuous than producing one long story that lasts 20 minutes. Whilst these clip shows may now be a thing of the past, I want to take a minute to discuss this often overlooked aspect of Simpsons history, and what's a better way to discuss these episodes than by ranking them from best to worst? I'm going to rank the episodes based on how creative and engaging they managed to be with their premises and reused material, asking questions such as, are the clips edited together in a manner that enhances the experience of watching them? And if you ignored the clips, would the frame story still be worth watching? Asking these questions will help uncover what merits and shortcomings each episode has, to help decide if it's worth watching in its own right, or if you should just look up the clips on YouTube instead. So, let's kick off this ranking, starting with what is in my opinion the least enjoyable episode to watch. Yep, the last clip show they ever produced is also the worst one. As stated in my opening, basically every clip show uses a frame story to explain why the audience are rewatching old clips. Like the 138th episode Spectacular, which presents the episode as if it were a live show, or All Singing All Dancing, which is presented as a musical. Gump Roast presents 3 different potential frame stories, those being a Forrest Gump parody, a comedy roast of Homer, and an alien invasion probing mankind. And instead of just picking one of these plots and sticking with it, the writers were like, nah, let's just jam all of these ideas into one episode. As a result, the episode has some abrupt plot shifts that make the whole experience feel somewhat disjointed. Nothing in the opening Forrest Gump parody sets up that there's going to be a roast in the next act. Homer just vaguely states that Marge is a surprise for him. There's no pretense given as to why this roast is even happening. It just is. Then, when the writers got bored of the roast, aliens just randomly crash in out of nowhere. I'm sure the show staff were aware of how ridiculous the plot was. They do end the episode by apologising for the clip show. And in all fairness, there is one through line tying these 3 separate plot ideas together, being that they're all centred on Homer. This, unsurprisingly, leads to a very Homer-centric episode, with most of the clips featured being Homer's antics and stupidity. Now, I love most of these moments individually, like Stupid Sexy Flanders, and Le Grill? What the hell is that? Are classics in their own right, but seeing all these similar Homer is reckless and dumb jokes fill up most of the episode does leave them feeling a little tired and repetitive. I do enjoy the montage sequences in the episode though, like the montage of Homer strangling Bart being a reminder of how a terrible act of child abuse became their most beloved running gag, and I unironically adore the trendy guest star montage just because it showcases what shameless shills the Simpsons can be sometimes. But that's just the reused material. What about the jokes new to this episode? Well, Gump Roast opens with a wince-inducing sequence of Homer getting jabbed in the eye by a feather, which is immediately followed by an awkward and forced pop culture reference to Austin Powers and Star Wars. Yeesh, that image of Moe is terrifying. This opening basically sets out how stale and cringy most of the jokes will be throughout the rest of the episode. Yeah, there are some alright jokes here, like the sign saying there's a Millhouse roast tomorrow, which I would 100% buy tickets to. Also, there's this cute recurring gag where the audience laughter is just Nelson, Dr. Hibbert and Mr. Burns reciting their catchphrases, although this gag is kinda similar to the one at the end of Bart Gets Famous. It is questionable why they even made a clip show as late as season 13, considering the anthology episodes were already a thing by then. Before this episode was produced, Dan Cassantella, the voice of Homer, was on hiatus with the other voice actors, whilst our salaries were being renegotiated. So maybe the use of clips was to make up for lost time. The idea for Gump Roast came when Castanella and his wife were discussing the Forrest Gump movie and compared the title character to Homer Simpson, saying they were both dim-witted and fumbled into situations. So they wrote this episode, but I guess they didn't want to make the episode a full-on Forrest Gump parody, considering they abandoned the idea after Act 1. But by far, the most memorable and creative thing to come out of Gump Roast is its closing song, They'll Never Stop the Simpsons, a parody of the song We Didn't Start the Fire by Billy Joel, which is a list song that makes rapid-fire allusions to headline events between the years of 1949 and 1989. Switching out these headlines for Simpsons episodes is a genius idea, considering what a pop culture phenomenon The Simpsons is. Plus, the series started in 1989, which is the final year referenced in the original We Didn't Start the Fire. The song makes fun of how long-running The Simpsons is, and suggests that over the years they've become increasingly desperate for story ideas. To demonstrate this, they then suggest episodes of intentionally silly premises, such as Marge becoming a robot, Moe getting a cell phone, Selma and Grandpa getting married, and Bart owning a bear. Although, to be fair, owning a bear isn't really as crazy as owning an elephant. But you know what the funniest part of these premises are? They actually used all of them. In season 15, Homer befriends a bear, which is the next best thing to Bart owning one. In season 18, Grandpa and Selma get married, with the freaking Disney Plus description even pointing out that Gump Roast predicted this. In season 31, Artie Ziff marries a robot clone of Marge, and, most importantly of all, in season 22, Moe finally got his cell phone. You know, maybe this song was never meant to be satirical. I honestly love this song so much that I thought it alone would be enough to lift Gump Roast to the 4th place slot, but unfortunately, the rest of the episode was such a slog that I had to leave it to curdle at the bottom of the barrel. Did that metaphor make any sense? On with the list. Winner of the Least Imaginative Title Award, another Simpsons clip show was written by John Vetti, who worked under the pseudonym Pennywise because he didn't want to be credited for writing a clip show, so pretend I didn't credit him just now. Another Simpsons clip show probably has the least amount of new animation out of any Simpsons episode ever. The characters are literally just sitting around in their house talking the entire time. Any interesting shot or piece of animation is from a past episode. Now, I know cutting down on animation cost was the main point of having a clip show, so in that sense another Simpsons clip show might be the most successful. But at least the other clip shows made up for their lack of new animation by having a few interesting set pieces, dynamic sequences, or imaginative still shots. The lack of animation means that any new material this episode offers is going to come completely from the dialogue. And to be fair, there are a few good jokes in here. Lisa's comment about Disney's hostile takeover is especially apt. The episode's frame story is about Marge trying to tell the kids about the beauty of love and romance. The clip show's format closely resembles that of anthology episodes, as instead of just using clips of one-off scenes, they instead do condensed retellings of love stories from past episodes, mainly Life on the Fast Lane, The Last Temptation of Homer, and I Love Lisa. The result of this is you're just watching watered-down versions of the original episodes, which naturally leads you to question, why not just watch the original episode? Another Simpsons clip show tries to transform the experience by having the characters make meta jokes and comments as they tell their stories, such as Marge commenting on how she drove down that ironic street. My favourite joke is the dramatic way Homer describes the cookie fortune of doom, but these jokes are just so few and far between. I think I would have preferred it if they had gone full-on Mystery Science Theater 3000, and just had the characters constantly riffing throughout the clips. There's also some strangeness in these retellings from a continuity standpoint, like Homer's retelling of The Last Temptation of Homer, which includes the scene where Mr. Burns releases the flying monkeys. But how did he even know that happened? I also find it weird that all of these flashbacks are portrayed as tales of heartbreak, even though these stories had uplifting endings. 2 of them even end by reconfirming Marge and Homer's love for each other. It's no surprise then, when Homer proves love isn't hopeless, by telling the story of his and Marge's first kiss. Honestly, you'd think that would be the first example of romance that Marge would bring up. This leads to a montage of Homer and Marge kissing, which, while cheesy, is also pretty sweet. The other 2 montage sequences are kinda fun too, saves me from having to make a couple of compilation videos. Ultimately, I had to rank this episode so low because of how uninspired it feels. The most praise I could give the episode is that it has a few funny lines, but you could say that about almost any Simpsons episode. Yes, even the new ones. Luckily, the rest of the clip shows are much more inspired with their concepts and executions. All Singing, All Dancing is a clip show presented in the form of a sung-through musical. Combining the two formats makes for a natural pairing, as clip shows and musicals share similar story structures. The plot of a musical is essentially a frame story used to string a series of musical numbers together into a narrative, just like how the plot of a clip show contains a frame story to present old clips. All Singing, All Dancing ends up lampooning its own format. After having Homer sing about how much he hates musicals for the entire episode, the family ultimately comes to the decision that the only thing worse than a musical comedy is a long-running series doing a cheesy clip show, effectively implying that any combination of the two would be some kind of Frankenstein abomination. The plot of All Singing, All Dancing has Lisa and Marge trying to convince Homer and Bart that musicals don't suck. The episode is completely upfront about how contradictory its own premise is, having Lisa and Marge point out that Homer and Bart's hatred of musicals makes no sense, as there are many times in the past that Homer and Bart have burst into song. All Singing, All Dancing also undermines its plot for its two screw-the-audience act breaks, in which they set up a dramatic cliffhanger at the end of one act, only for it to have an anticlimactic resolution at the beginning of the next act. At the end of Act 1, Snake randomly breaks into the Simpsons' house to hold them hostage, only for him to immediately leave at the beginning of Act 2, because of the Simpsons' annoying singing. He then comes back at the end of Act 2 and threatens to kill them, only for him to immediately leave again at the beginning of Act 3 because he has no ammo. He then comes back for a final time at the end of the episode threatening to kill the family because of their singing, only for the family to tell Snake that they're singing, and therefore the episode is over now, so Snake leaves. And as the credits play, Snake fires his shotgun, telling them to stop playing the credits music. Snake ends up being a caricature of the audience in two ways. The abrupt, anticlimactic resolution to Snake's hostage situation mocks anyone who was expecting the episode to have any kind of stakes, while Snake being turned off and leaving when the family starts singing acts as a parallel of any fan who hates the episode's musical format and stopped watching because of it. These screw-the-audience jokes let the audience know that this episode is a bit of a farce, so you don't have to get hung up on plot logic, such as wondering how all these musical numbers ended up being recorded on video. Most of the musical numbers are reused clips from past episodes, with the only new music being the opening Gonna Paint Your Wagon song, as well as the through line itself. The Paint Your Wagon parody, which I only found out was a real film while researching this video, makes for a delightfully cheesy musical number, with the Lee Marvin singing impersonation being my personal highlight. Considering that a clip show's main purpose is to save money on things like animation, it is a pleasant surprise that they animated this new musical number with a unique set design for it. The quality of the through line itself varies. They use it to make a lot of tactless jokes implying that singing and dancing is emasculating, which I'm generally not a fan of, although I will admit the "that's really more of a Millhouse thing" line still gets a chuckle out of me, mainly because of Bart's delivery and dancing. I'd say that Snake's interruptions stand out as being the funniest and most memorable parts of the through line, my favourite part being when Snake and the family keep going back at each other, because it sounds like that song from Frozen 2. The musical clips themselves are presented in three groups. Act 1 has clips of times Homer and Bart have sung, Act 2 has clips of their friends and acquaintances singing, and Act 3 has times establishments have burst into song. When you put all these together, you end up with a collection of most of the Simpsons' most memorable show tunes from the first 8 seasons. There are a handful of songs missing, such as the Lisa It's Your Birthday song, which is ironic considering the episode it's from has now been pulled from streaming services, although Lisa It's Your Birthday is reprised in the episode Mr. Lisa's Opus, so it's not completely lost. But there is one other very notable absence from All Singing, All Dancing. I am of course referring to the greatest Simpsons musical number of all time. No, the greatest musical number to be produced for any piece of media ever! The Planet of the Apes musical. At first I thought this number's absence was utterly atrocious, but I guess if the point of the episode is to show how Springfield has a tendency to burst into random musical numbers at any given moment, using an actual musical would have been a bit on the nose. And they do make up for it by including Phil Hartman's second greatest hit, the Monorail song. Overall, if you don't care for musicals, or musical numbers in The Simpsons, there's not much for you here, but if you just feel like rewatching some of The Simpsons' best musical moments, All Singing, All Dancing presents them in a neat little package. So it's come to this, a Simpsons clip show, is The Simpsons' first ever clip show episode, its title being a meta-joke about how reluctant the staff were to make it. Like Season 6's Another Simpsons clip show, this episode was also written by John Vetti, who actually didn't mind being credited under his real name for the first clip show he wrote. I guess he was more shameless back then. Out of all the clip shows, I find that So It's Come to This most closely resembles a typical Simpsons episode. There aren't even any clips in the first 5 minutes. It also has its fair share of funny original material, getting a lot of mileage out of both the April Fool's Day pranks and Homer's hospitalization. What I find strange about the episode's Homer being hospitalized plot is that Season 4 already has another episode about that, Homer's triple bypass. A lot of the scenes of Homer talking with his friends and family between the episodes feel like they parallel each other. I'd say the key difference between the episodes is that Homer's triple bypass treats Homer's medical condition with a lot more gravity, highlighting that, because the family can't afford decent healthcare, Homer dying from his heart condition is a very real possibility. Meanwhile, So It's Come to This treats the whole ordeal more like a farce, with Homer enduring over-the-top injuries, like his beer can literally exploding on him, or the candy machine crushing him, leaving him to choke on chocolate bars. And even though Homer is in a life-threatening coma, it's never portrayed in a particularly serious light. Instead, they make jokes about Professor Frink wanting to send a voyage into Homer's colon, or how understated everyone's reaction is to Mr. Burns repeatedly unplugging Homer's life support, which, by the way, is my favourite joke of the episode. I want to be clear. Me pointing out that the episode doesn't take the situation seriously isn't a criticism. To the contrary, I think this was actually the right approach to take. It would have been difficult to get invested in a more emotional episode with the clips constantly interrupting the narrative flow. The only scene that tries to be somber is when Lisa plays her sax to her unconscious father, which is accompanied with a pan out the window so you can only see their silhouette. It's a beautiful scene within itself, so beautiful in fact, that they reused it in a montage sequence in the season 9 episode Lisa's Sax. They reused the clip from a clip show. Clipception. The scene where Bart apologises to Homer for his prank is also kind of sentimental, but this is immediately undermined by Homer waking up to strangle Bart. Homer waking up from his coma is actually my favourite animated sequence in the episode. I love that his IV bag starts to literally boil with rage, and the heart monitor taking the shape of Bart's head, genius. My only real contention with the episode is the way it presents its clips. In most cases the character will say, "This is like the time X happened," then they'll play the scene they were referencing and move on. I already made that Family Guy cutaway comparison in my intro, but this is the clip show where that comparison is most apt. Now, obviously the clips they're using are all great classic moments. If you haven't seen any of these scenes in a while, you can enjoy them here, but I don't think I can give this episode credit just for rehashing jokes that came from earlier episodes. Like another Simpsons clip show, I think the best use of clips are the ones where they add some additional meta-commentary to the clips they play, like the joke they make about Homer's doctor being the veterinarian from Dog of Death, or when the family are reminiscing about Homer and Bart flashes back to an Itchy and Scratchy episode instead. I'd also like to give a shout out to the two montage sequences in the episode, the first being the supercut of Homer's head injuries, and the second being the dough montage. I appreciate montages because they add a transformative element to the clips themselves, editing all these moments into a quick-fire sequence. The idea for the doll sequence actually came from the montage David Silverman had assembled for his travelling college show, but ultimately, the Springfield Gorge clip probably deserves the crown of the best clip, as it actually uses new footage that was animated specifically for the clip show. Also, the clip that I find most confusing is the flashback to the Treehouse of Horror episode, where Kang and Kudos abduct the family. Marge referencing this kind of implies that the alien abduction is canon. Then again, most of the later clip shows clearly aren't canon, so it probably doesn't mean anything. Overall, I think So It's Come to This has the best narrative out of the clip shows. If you were to cut all the clips out, it would remain a decent episode, but there's just one other clip show that I like a little more for it being a truly unique experience. There are two factors of the 138th episode spectacular that make it stand out above the other clip shows, those being the choice of clips and Troy McClure. Literally calling the 138th episode of The Simpsons the 138th episode isn't the most original thing in the world, but it makes up for it by having the most original premise and material compared to all the other clip shows. The Spectacular's format is a parody of clip shows done by All in the Family and Three's Company, in which one of the show's actors or creators would host the show, showing a live audience clips from the show's history. In the Simpsons variation, Troy McClure hosts a special from a stage set made to look like the Simpsons house. Although, as a Simpsons nerd, I gotta point out that the stage's layout doesn't reflect the actual layout of the Simpsons house. Each act of the episode uses a different group of clips. Act 1 uses the Tracy Ullman shorts, Act 2 showcases montage sequences, and Act 3 shows deleted scenes. The Ullman shorts and the deleted scenes are the biggest USP of the episode, as the general audience probably won't have seen them before. I imagine this episode was a lot of people's introduction to the Ullman shorts. I know this is how I first learnt they existed. When the Ullman show aired in England, the Simpsons shorts were actually cut from the show, the BBC thinking the crude drawings would never catch on. The shorts themselves might not be masterpieces, but it is fascinating to see how much The Simpsons has changed since its inception, like how incredibly creepy Marge's voice was, or seeing the exaggerated sight gags, like Maggie's jiggling eyes. The actual series would rarely attempt these types of sight gags, outside of fantasy sequences. Troy McClure's dumbfounded reaction to these shorts is absolutely priceless, as it encapsulates the reaction that a Simpsons fan unfamiliar with the Ullman shorts may have. And then he just laughs off his bewilderment and insists that the Simpsons haven't changed a bit. This forced enthusiasm makes Troy McClure the perfect vehicle to mock the presentation of clip shows. Take this statement McClure makes about the almond shorts, for instance.
As the weeks went on, so did the cartoons.
This deliberately uninsightful statement draws attention to how McClure's narration is just a means to transition between selected clips, but it's delivered with the utmost enthusiasm to try and disguise this. The joke ends up highlighting how many of the lines in clip shows' only purpose is to set up for the next clip. It doesn't matter if what the character says is completely vapid, as long as it sets up that clip. In the second act, McClure responds to some common fan questions, or statements. My personal highlight of this act is the Smithers bait and switch. It's such a great joke that it makes up for them reusing the dream sequence a second time after it already appeared in another Simpsons clip show. I also appreciate how the Spectacular limits the amount of aired clips it reuses, mainly only using them during montage sequences and to give context for the deleted scenes. The deleted scenes themselves aren't shown till the final act. I'd guess they were intentionally held to the end to entice viewers into watching the entire episode. The deleted scenes being content that the fans would only get easy access to years later, when the DVD releases came out. I'd say that the quality of the scenes vary. I can definitely see why some of them were cut from their original episode. The crusty sex stuff is pretty awkward, but there are some hidden gems in here. My favourite scene is the one from Mother Simpson, for it being a cute bonding scene between Homer and his mum, as well as it containing a clever callback to Deep Space Homer. The episode also contains what is probably the most famous deleted Simpsons scene ever, the Richard Simmons robot. The scene was cut from the original episode as the writers and the test audiences didn't find it very funny, but when the scene was shown at animation conventions or college conventions, it would make the audience erupt with laughter, so it was inserted into this episode. It's great that such a beloved scene was eventually able to make its way into the series, even though I'm personally pretty mixed on it. I just find the robot really disturbing, and I think the joke is a bit too random and absurd for my taste, but I can certainly appreciate the "his ass is gonna blow" line. Quite a few of the clips are alternative endings for the Who Shot Mr. Burns episode. These were created by showrunner David Merkin to cover up the real solution, hoping he would fool the staff and that the fake endings would be leaked into media outlets, although he was ultimately unsuccessful. But Merkin put so much effort into having all these extra scenes animated that I'm glad they were eventually put to good use by being added to this episode. What I really appreciate about The Spectacular is that it's one of the few episodes of The Simpsons to give its audience a behind-the-scenes look at the show. The later episode, Behind the Laughter, would also do a similar behind-the-scenes style episode, although there they present the Simpsons family like they're real people acting in a live-action sitcom, and barely acknowledge any real-life production. Whereas The Spectacular truly does pull back the curtain on what makes The Simpsons. Its history, fan reception, deleted material, and it does all this whilst cracking satirical jokes about itself the whole time. It's like you're taking a crash course in The Simpsons production history, but having the lesson taught to you in the most Simpson-y way possible. I'd also like to take a moment to thank the episode's writer, Penny Wise, as well as the director, Pound Foolish, for bringing this one-of-a-kind masterpiece. But even if the almond shorts, the deleted scenes, or Troy McClure's hosting isn't enough to entice you, the episode still has one thing that every fan comes to The Simpsons for: hardcore nudity! Now I'll never have to live in fear of Simpsons porn becoming illegal.